What's going on, everyone? It's another episode of the WVSports.com podcast. My name is Wesley Shoemaker, joined by, as always, the one and only Keenan Cummings. So, Keenan, you've got kids. I'm not sure if they have those bubble machines, where there's like a million bubbles blown out, or like
We
those
we have
things
a few of those actually.
where you could take the soap out and blow it. But the bubble is right where West Virginia is starting to creep to here on February 17th, as an overtime loss against Baylor put them at an 0-2 week, and now they return home against Cincinnati in what is as must win of a game as we've had this year, even though we've deemed a couple of these things must win for the Mountaineers. So before we get into where they stand in terms of bracket seeding, whatever, let's break down the loss to Baylor. West Virginia battled late. They did a lot of things right, especially in that second half. They were just not scoring the ball well in the first half, and then the strong close in the final minute really kind of gave them some life. And then a really impressive run to start the second half got them into it, gave them a lead at certain points early on. And then they just kind of battled to the end, had a couple defensive stands there late when they needed it, made a couple of free throws. And then in overtime, Keenan, their defense did exactly what you wanted them to do. They didn't allow Baylor to score from the field. However, the Bears took 12 trips to the free throw line, made 9 of those, and that was all she wrote, as I think WVU went 2 of 11 in the extra frame from the field. So we are entering territory, I think, that 8 games ago, neither of us thought this team would really get to. They've lost 6 of their last 8, and they're closer to an 11 kind of first 4 game than they are the 8-9 seed line as it stands now. Obviously, a lot can change, but what are your thoughts on start with the Baylor loss and then where they stand going forward?
Well, I know no one out here is going to want to hear this because results are the only thing that matters, but I thought West Virginia did pretty much everything they needed to do in that game except win it. I thought they played very well. At times, the offense gets a little stagnant, but that's been pretty much the case all year, Wes. I mean, when have we not had stretches where West Virginia struggled to score the ball? I mean, that's kind of just what it is. But they were able to get Javon Small, get him some more opportunities, free him up a little bit more, get other people involved as well. Had a lot of open looks that just didn't fall. Sometimes that's going to be the case, but West Virginia absolutely needs, and it's not fair because I think both these guys are playing bigger roles than they probably anticipated before the start of the season. But Jonathan Powell, Joe Yesufu have got to hit open shots because they're going to get them. They're going to get them in those corners, and for the most part, that was not the case in this game. Both of them hit a couple shots. I know Jonathan Powell had a 4-point play, and Yesufu hit a few, pretty impressive baskets, but you got to hit those open ones, and they didn't. And I'm not throwing it on them, but that's kind of a key here. If Javon Small is going to command the attention he's got, and you kick it to the baseline, guys are wide open, you got to hit those shots. And sometimes those fall, sometimes they don't. But you got to continue to have confidence. They got to have confidence in both those guys moving forward, because if they're not scoring, it's going to be hard for this team to win. It's kind of the way it's been working. When those two guys are on point, West Virginia is really hard to beat because of everything everybody else. And Toby O'Connie just continued his offensive tear. In the past 2 games, he's been incredible. I think he has 35 points. He shot ridiculous from the field. Needs to make free throws, but that's kind of been the case all year. But other than that, he's played really well. I thought that Sincere Harris was very, very good in this game for the most part, but I thought that offensively in the second half, they kind of found some things that worked. There are obviously a little bit of lulls, but defensively is where we got to talk about, Wes, because great effort defensively against a really talented Baylor team. A team that can get to the rim, a team
That's got NBA bodies all over the floor.
Yes, a team that can kick it out for 3. Kind of a nightmare situation when you were coming off what you allowed at BYU in the second half, and they turned the water off on them for a lot of that game. I thought that West Virginia played very well defensively. Baylor made some tough shots too. Kind of same thing that happened at BYU. West Virginia played very good defense for most of the shot clock, and then Baylor would make a runner off 1 foot or kick it out and make a 3 as clock expired. So I thought that, very good defensive effort. And I think that tracks and that travels. If West Virginia plays that well defensively, every game of the remaining 6, they're going to have a chance to win every single one of them. Now, you got to have that same intensity, same effort, but I liked what I saw. It's weird coming off a loss. I even wrote kind of an article about this because Darren DeVries talked about the same thing. A lot of positives. He wasn't down on his team. They lost a tough game, a quad one game on the road. It's going to happen. You'd like to go back and maybe get one of those two. Last week you had chances to win them both. Joe Yesufu missed a shot, in the corner to beat BYU, and then they kind of faltered down the stretch against Baylor, but you didn't. That's where you are. You're 15-10 right now, 6-8 in the league. So you mentioned it earlier. We talked about this last week. They were safely in. They're still safely in, but we're creeping really close to that bubble. You look at bracket matrix. I think they're a 10 seed now.
They're the highest 10 seed. They're at technically a 9-6-8, which has them as the first quote unquote 10 seed in this thing.
But what you're starting to worry about is you look at some of those projections. They got them down on the 12, the 11 line, and that's when you get in those play-in games. You get in the 11 type deal. So I think there's
112 as I scroll through it all. There's one place that lists them as a 12, and the rest are mostly 9s.
Yeah, I was looking at it earlier today. I saw it's creeping back, and that's not what you want this time of the year. So I think it goes without saying, this will lead into what we need to talk about next, Wes, and it's the Cincinnati game. Big game for West Virginia. I mean, I don't want to say it's the game of the season because it's not, because what comes next is going to be just as big. But at this point of the season, it's probably the biggest game they've played all year.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. But real quick, one more thing from the Baylor game. The biggest thing that they did defensively that they've done well all year is limit how teams do from three. I think West Virginia might be the second best three-point defense in the Big 12. Baylor, who had come in and just shot 50-something% against Houston out of all teams from the field and made, I think, 10-ish threes in that game. West Virginia held them to 5 of 22 from beyond the arc. That's really impressive. And that a lot of times starts with the ball pressure, forcing these teams into these shots that they just don't necessarily want to take. That was impressive, but also their ability to kind of hold their own on the glass, especially in the second half, yes, against a Baylor team that's really good rebounding the ball this year, and for a West Virginia team that has been poor at rebounding the ball this year. I think, go ahead.
I was going to say, Wes, if I would have told you, this is why I keep going back to what I was saying at the beginning. If I would have told you that Baylor would have shot 30-some%, 20-some% from three, had 2 second chance points, West Virginia wins that game, right?
Yeah.
They won that game.
Yeah.
But unfortunately they didn't. We'll get,
yep.
Speaking of Marvel, we were talking about before we got on here, maybe we get an alternate reality here where they do win that game. But no, I think that one of the biggest troublesome things too for West Virginia is, you can point to officiating all you want. West Virginia's got to do a better job of stop sending teams to the line. They're killing themselves with fouls. Some of those are ticky-tacky. You can go through it every game. It goes both ways. But the foul discrepancy is really adding up in Big 12 play. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I was looking at them the other day, and it's pretty stark what teams are shooting compared to what West Virginia's shooting. And it's costing them ball games, especially because – for some reason, I don't know what West Virginia did to deserve this, but every team they play seems to shoot 90% from the foul line every time they play them. So
here, I got the numbers in front of me. This was according to it's a tweet. On the season, opponents are out shooting WVU from the line 461 to 381. During Big 12 play, it's 258 to 191.
That's in
the month of February, it's 101 to 58.
And it's some of that is a product of what West Virginia does. They take some shots, but it's always kind of alarming to me when teams have more field goals and they're scoring more in the paint. But
this is two close losses: the TCU loss and now the Baylor loss, where there's been a double-digit point discrepancy at the free throw line. And while it is hard to say the team lost because of it, it's hard also not to say
it's a factor.
When a team scores 10 more points by shooting free throws and you lose the game by 3 on the road, that's not a factor.
Yeah, it's a factor. And unfortunately for West Virginia, you got to make some.
If Amani Hansberry makes the and one there late in the second half.
Yeah, you have a lead late.
Yeah, if Toby Okani goes to the line and makes those two in overtime, right?
Or and misses it.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot there. I think Javon Small missed one. He's been almost automatic from the line this year, I know.
So when you do get there, you got to make them. I mean,
Exactly.
so yeah, you
But
can't really.
it's really hard to look at Toby Okani right now and say I have
Yeah,
confidence in you going to the free throw because I mean even go back to that pick game, it was when he airballed the couple, right? Like it's been a long year for him from the free throw line, but the problem is that teams know that now, and the other problem is I mean I had one of my friends say why is he on the floor if he can't shoot the free throws? Well, you got 7 guys in there at that point because Amani Hansberry fouled out, and you just need Okani to be on the floor because he's played a lot of college basketball, and who
and
else
he's
are you
by far one of
yeah,
your best rebounders. I mean,
who else are you going to put out there at that point? And so that's a liability, and teams are going to basically say, we'll put our hands behind our back and let him catch this inbounds pass and then foul him if we need to foul someone because the chances are he might miss. And that's a struggle spot to be in if you're West Virginia. They've got to figure that out. And let's go to the Cincinnati game, right? So I think Cincinnati's 44th in the net, West Virginia's 40.
45th, West Virginia's 44th.
Okay, that's what it is. Looking at the resumes now, Keenan, I know that you could say these teams are kind of fighting for the same spot. I don't think they're fighting for the same spot at all. Cincinnati is 1-9 in quad one games this year.
Yep.
West Virginia is 5-7. This is a quad one game for Cincinnati. This is a quad two game for the Mountaineers. But if you get this one, what's the magic number we've been saying? 19, right, Keenan?
Yep.
This goes a long way. And we said you have to protect home court. You get this one and 2 more. You've got to win this one. You can't let a team that is 1-9 in quad one games come into your building and get a win. And
No.
I know that you beat them pretty soundly the first time around.
This is a different Cincinnati team, though, than the
yes,
one.
the Cincinnati team is playing good basketball. The Cincinnati team has figured out how to run offense because
they were very much in that Iowa State game Saturday until things kind of went sideways with fouls late. So
yeah, and I mean 3 weeks ago when this team played Cincinnati,
they looked awful.
They were getting booed off the floor at their own building.
They looked awful.
Yeah. So it goes a long way. Percentage-wise, like team rankings, I continue to look at them. Projected record in most spots is 18 wins right now before pre-conference tournament. So that's like regular season. That means they would have to get 1 in Kansas City, probably 2, maybe even. It's crazy. They've got West Virginia at a 26% chance to go 19-12, a 34% chance to go 18-13, 23% chance to go 17-14, and then a 9% chance to go 20-11. It's getting tight, bro. Like it's getting tight. It's starting to be like you're holding on to the seat of your pants just because of how nervous and how much a 4-minute swing in a game could have on where this team goes. And that's not a place you really want to be in this time of year.
Yeah, they got to win these 3 home games. Let's just cut it out. They got to win these 3 home games. You got to.
I mean, UCF lost to Colorado, who hadn't had a Big 12 win yet. Like
you have got to find a way to beat Cincinnati, which I think is the most difficult of the 3. TCU, which West Virginia had a chance in that game and played awful. I mean, they played awful and had a chance to win at TCU.
That's a quad 3 game.
Yeah, that's the worst one left, right?
Yes.
Okay, you got to win that game. You can't afford a quad 3 loss this late in the year. Okay, and then you got to beat UCF. Those are 3 very winnable games. And then you go on the road. You get Utah. You get BYU, a chance for redemption there. They're winnable games.
Texas Tech looks harder and harder by the
Texas Tech looks real. That's why I didn't mention them. I think that's going to be really tough. You look at the way I don't want to get ahead of myself, but the way West Virginia matches up with them, they're going to have a really tough time with their big, and their guards are really good too. So that's going to be a tough one. But you never know. It's college basketball. I didn't have West Virginia beating Gonzaga either on a neutral floor or Arizona. So here we go. I think that really, though, when you look at this game coming up, West Virginia struggled in midweek games. We've talked about that. This is a chance for them to kind of refocus, reset in a sense, and really get a win that they need. You move to 16-10. I think I don't want to say you take Cincinnati out of the tournament picture. That's not fair. But like you said, I don't think they're necessarily competing for the same spot, but I do think they're competing on the bubble. And Cincinnati's got pretty good metrics, even with those terrible quad 1 numbers. So you don't want to give a reason for Cincinnati to somehow be selected over you. And I think if you split, it's not necessarily as bad, but if you sweep them, that kind of puts you over them.
Even if you lose in Kansas City, even if you were to face them in like the second round or whatever in Kansas City,
That
Like
puts you over them.
going 2-0 and beating them on the road, and that puts you over them 100%.
Yes, and I think that matters at this stage because who knows what this team's going to finish wins wise. You go on the road and beat apparently a very good Utah team who took care of Kansas over the weekend.
Kansas is a different story, but
yeah, Kansas is their numbers are still good. I don't know how they're so good in the net.
Yeah,
but I think they're 5-7, just like West Virginia in the net, and somehow are perched up at like 15, 16.
They're 5-7 in quad 1 games, 5-1 in quad 2 games, and they're 15th in the net as of right now.
Yeah, some of these things that I don't get like this year.
It's probably the quad 2 games. That's probably the big difference.
It might be like I feel like usually I have a pretty good understanding of it, and it makes sense to me. This year it kind of seems like it's all over. But back to what we were talking about, you find a way to win this game. I think you effectively put yourself over them. And then, like I said, we've talked about this before. If you go on the road and beat BYU, you kind of steal that trump card back they have over you. And I know they're playing pretty good basketball right now and a little bit ahead of West Virginia in the pecking order, but still, who knows what's going to unfold over the next 6 games. So every win is critical at this point. And I think it's something that Darren DeVries has talked to about his team. He understands everything that they want still right there in front of them. And it's a chance to really get a big win. I mean, because going to Texas Tech is going to be tough. So you don't want to be going to Texas Tech on a 3-game losing streak. You just don't want to be doing that.
Yeah, and especially like that's the thing that I wonder about this team, because when you look at it, Javon Small, what's the big thing he's never done? He's never played in an NCAA tournament game.
Andre too.
Yeah, so like all these older guys that you have, it's not like they've got this great history of experience of playing in these high pressure moments. And that's what these next 2.5 weeks are going to turn into. Is if you're in a close game, everything's going to be so much more magnified because of the potential postseason implications. And that's where you wonder about guys like KJ Tenner, guys like Jonathan Powell, when we're seeing them miss these open shots, or in a sense like KJ, when he's kind of hesitating to possibly take a shot.
Yeah, they need more
going on between their ears, because that's almost as important as anything this time of year. Is how do your young guys handle these kind of brighter moments, these moments of March, in a sense of, you have to have a win. You're up 4 late. How do you close out? Or you're up 2 late and you need one more bucket with 25 seconds and change left or something, right? Like all these scenarios where you have the chance to kind of seal a win, or you have a chance to, like against Baylor, to get back into the game. How do you do that and then consistently do that when you have never been here before? Most of these guys as their own career, but now also as a team.
Yeah, and it's freshman wall season too. It's happening all across the country. It happens every year, and you got to try to. Sometimes you can overcome it. Sometimes it kind of cuts you off. So West Virginia needs. It's unfortunate because I think both guys are being thrust into larger roles than they ever expected. In year one, but they need those guys to play well. I mean, they just need them to.
Powell's 1-12 and 1-9 from 3. It was an ugly showing when a lot of those were open threes.
He took good shots.
In fairness, I like, you have to respect that it's a good shot he's taking, but also, I mean, when you have an older guy like Eduardo Andre that 3 straight possessions in a row really doesn't know what to do with the basketball, it's hard.
That was a disaster sequence.
It's hard to then point at the true freshman Jonathan Powell, who's taking good looks and just missing them and saying, this is more your fault. But like, that was an ugly couple of minutes. And then also the foul trouble. That's what we didn't also talk about Baylor, is that they had Andre and Hansberry at 5 fouls combined in the first half. I mean, even Harris got a foul there. Like, it was just bigs getting fouls like crazy, and then they had to manage that, and they still were able to manage that. And the minutes that you're starting to get right now between Andre versus Hansberry are very different minutes, and not in a good way. If you're West Virginia, at one point this year was different in terms of they're giving you 2 different things that it's hard for teams to counter. Right now, it's Hansberry is giving you pretty solid minutes, and there's starting to be a drop off with Andre, I would say.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, going back to what we were talking about earlier, and it just blows my mind that West Virginia, you look at the stats and they still lost this basketball game. They held Edgecombe to 7 points.
Yeah.
And I mean, they did everything right, like in a lot, almost everything, obviously not everything, but I mean, that's the margin of errors in this league. We've talked about it a bunch. Like, it's thin, and especially for West Virginia, they, with how the roster is, they've got to do certain things to win, and down the stretch, you got to be able to make critical plays. And 2 games in a row, West Virginia's had the basketball with a chance to tie or win the game and haven't got it done. And it's simple as that. They got it done against Kansas. They won that basketball game. They didn't get it done in these last 2.
Hey, let's do a little exercise we haven't done since football season. Do they win against Cincinnati, Keenan?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes. I think this is almost one of those ones where if they don't win, you really start to worry that this might go a little sideways.
Mm-hmm.
I know this is a veteran team with a lot of guys that have experience and they're playing for stuff, but man, the losses pile up this time of the year. It's the worst time of the year to start losing. It's hard to turn things around when it gets in a bad direction. I think that, it's a midweek game, but I expect the Coliseum to be pretty jacked for this one. I expect the players to be ready for this one. They've already beaten the Cincinnati team. Granted, we talked earlier, a different Cincinnati team. They're playing much better right now, but West Virginia's played pretty well too. I know they've lost 2 of their last 3, but I would argue that there's been stretches over the last 3 games, might have been some of the best basketball they've played all year, at least with the current lineup.
Mm-hmm.
Not, taking Tucker out of the equation. Like, they've played well offensively. And they had breakdowns defensively in the second half against BYU, but they played pretty well on both ends against Utah. And I think that, they figured some things out. I like the fact they got Javon Small, more active on offense, because while, he's always going to make the right play, as Darren DeVries says all the time, and I think that's true, you still want him shooting the ball. I mean, I know even if he's getting a lot of attention, it's hard to do that when you're teams are clogging up the lane and doubling him, but you want him to take shots because he's your best player. I mean, very clearly.
Yeah, it's starting to do. I mean, for me, it was like when you were looking at this team kind of run through things there in overtime, it was like, Javon, I mean, just go. Like, just try and do something yourself, because there's just a trust factor with him compared to everyone else where you live with it if it's him because he's your best player and he's been so good. And I think he's kind of is going to have that takeover mentality that we've seen at times this year, where he's like, it's me versus everyone else. I'm the best player on the court. I'm going to act like it. I'm not saying talent-wise he was the best player on the court Saturday, because Baylor's probably got, higher ceilings with a couple of their dudes. But you get what I'm saying of, it's me versus everyone else. I'm going to play one-on-one. I'm going to try and get a bucket. Let's see what I can do.
And I'm even fine if he kicks it. But that goes back to what I was saying earlier. I mean, you got to be able to make the shots. Yeah. And no, it's basketball. That's the game of basketball. You're not going to make every shot you take. I don't care who you are. But you got to be able to hit those open ones, especially when, Small is able to attract so much attention and get you open. So I think that's going to be key for West Virginia. They're obviously going to have to play good defense against Cincinnati, because Jizzle James and some of those guys have kind of woken up from their midseason slumber. So I think this is going to be a much more challenging matchup. But West Virginia's at home. I know that hasn't always meant great things this year, but
especially not on a midweek. Especially not on a midweek.
I know that hasn't meant that, but I do think they get it done. What about you? What are your thoughts?
I'm going to say they win it, just a sense of desperation with them, right? Like, at some point, I think DeVries we've seen how into it he's been this year with the crowd. I think he kind of gets into it with his guys of, do you want to make the NCAA tournament or not? Because that's what's hanging in the balance right now. You look Javon Small in the eyes, dude, this is your last year of college hoops. Do you want to go dancing? That's what I think it comes down to, is that desperation factor. And we've seen past West Virginia teams be really desperate in moments like this. I want to see that intensity from the jump. They've started to bring it, especially early on, but I want to see that for 40 minutes from this group of, that it's do or die time. How do you respond? And I think they respond well, and I think they get a win. But I think it's one of those ugly. I mean, if this game's in the 40s, it really wouldn't shock me. Like, that's a crazy thing to say, but if it's like 51-49, it wouldn't shock me.
Yeah, both these teams like to muck it up, so it wouldn't surprise me either.
Let's go to baseball real quick. Mountaineers went 3-0 over the weekend. Their 4th game got rained out on Sunday against Jacksonville. So 3 wins in 2 days for Steve Sabins in his first couple games as West Virginia's head coach. They won a couple close ones, 4-2 on Friday. Game 1 on Saturday was 3-2, and then it was a 10-3 victory. I might have those backwards. It's been a long weekend, but good showing for them. Pitching showed up. Griffin Kern, who is a Division II transfer, similar to Derek Clark last year, South with a lot of experience came in. He pitched about as well as you could in that spot on Friday night in your game one of the season. He gave you almost 6 innings, I think 1 hit, a couple of walks, 5 Ks. Logan Save, first pitch of the freaking season, man, he rips a single, and it was kind of a good first couple of innings on the Friday night game. Then Skylar King had a really big day on Saturday. He had a home run, I think he had like 4-ish RBIs this weekend, so he had a good day. But what really impressed me was the pitching this weekend, especially the bullpen. You really didn't have any guy that just got shellacked in terms of just he didn't have his stuff really. Don't look at ERA until April because it's such a weird stat, but look at walks, look at control, look at things like that because that's important. But the lineup hit, and that's what's been cool, but also what has been missing in past years, what they've done in the first 3 games is pitch, because throwing strikes is the name of the game this time of year, and they certainly did that this past weekend.
Yeah, and I thought, listening to Steve Saban's press conference today, I thought it was encouraging, some of the things he said that, he thought that in game one they played about as well as they could possibly play. They controlled the game. That's the best they played all weekend. But with, a relatively young team, he felt that it was good for them to kind of be in a situation where even though they played that well, that Jacksonville comes to the plate with a chance to tie the game in the ninth. And you got to play well every game if you want to win at this level. And I think that that's what this West Virginia team is going to have to do. Like you said, pitching seems to be on point early. I mean, it's early, but anytime you get good pitching to start the year, you look at some of those baseball scores this weekend.
Dude, did you?
I thought it was football. I thought we were back in August.
William and Mary score yesterday? It was like 36-22 or 33-22 or something like that, and it got cut short in 7 innings. Excuse me.
Yeah, they were playing slow pitch softball, I think.
Yeah. But no, it was good to see this team play well. The lineup is as deep as it can be right now. You saw that with the variations that they threw out this weekend. You're going to continue to see that probably for the next couple weeks because conference play does get going earlier this year just because it's expanded once again. They're at 30 league games instead of, I think traditionally it was 24 or 27. So that takes away a non-conference series, and you get going out of the gate if you're West Virginia in Big 12 play. I think you have Oklahoma State and Arizona, and those are 2 legit teams. I know Arizona went 0-3 this weekend, but they played some of the best teams in the country. It's no joke what you're having to do and to start your Big 12 year, but it's a good sign to see this team that had so much success last year kind of continue to carry over. Good for Steve Saban. It's good for that whole coaching staff too. I mean, there's a lot of new faces in that room, but also a lot of faces that have been kind of around WVU baseball that just haven't had the shine because it's been focused more on Maisie. Saban's gave them a lot of credit for their efforts this weekend, which was good to see. And then I think the Mountaineers head to Lipscomb this weekend, and so that'll be, I think, in 3 or 4 more games as well, and so that'll be interesting. One more note, I know we were talking about this last week, and right after we hopped off podcasting, of course, it came out officially. Spring practice starts next week. I think, the 26th? Is that correct?
25th.
25th. So next Wednesday, I think that is.
No, maybe you're right. It's Tuesday.
It's that Tuesday?
Yeah, 25th.
Okay. And then the spring exercise, the spring game activity.
Showcase.
The spring showcase. The spring.
I love how they're not even pretending to call it a game anymore.
Yeah, it's like the Pro Bowl still has like the Pro Bowl game, I guess, as the title. And they're not even calling this a spring game.
I mean, the grander point here, Wes, is like, I think within probably 5 years, there might not even be spring football or spring game or anything. If the House settlement is approved as everybody expects, I think you're going to
probably turn into that like the NFL model where you got
you're going to go to the summer OTAs.
Yeah.
I mean, that right now, and to be honest with you, spring football has a role in it, but even the last few years, under Neil, they just kind of experimented, did a lot of wild stuff, and the summer OTAs is when things got serious. That's when they want everybody on campus. Mm-hmm. That's when they want the roster set. And I think that that's the model you're going to move to. It'll be a June, July type deal that matters because of so much change, so much movement. And that's the only way you can do it. I mean, you're adding the spring portal window doesn't even open until West Virginia's done with spring practice.
Yeah.
So how are you going to add guys? You use a time machine? I mean, that's just the way it works now.
Yeah, with in the way roster construction is, when you have so many guys that are like play now or leave. I mean, there's a lot of guys that will know by April 5th if they're probably going to be playing a lot in the fall. and we'll see what happens with them, because a lot of guys in this world of, even with NIL and stuff, it's like, I want to play now. And if you're older, that's even more of the case, because you're going to run out of eligibility and you might never, ever play again. But anything else from you, or should we wrap this thing up?
I think we're good. Let's punch it towards Wednesday and see what West Virginia can do on the basketball floor. Big one, Wes.
Huge one. But until then, we will keep it locked on our website, on the message board. Go sign up if you haven't. It's getting interesting this time of year. A lot of fun those game thread conversations might be some of the funniest reading of the.
A delight.
It goes up and down, like no matter who you're looking at, ourselves included. But I'm Wesley Shoemaker, joined by Keenan Cummings. If you made it this far, we do appreciate listening. And this was the WVSports.com podcast.